This topic was chosen recently because I think we noticed that during this period when human activities becomes very minimal or very restrained, this is the time that nature starts to rejuvenate the whole world by itself. And indeed, I think you have started to see a lot of blue skies, a lot of animals enjoying the freedom of space. And at the same time, the air now becomes less polluted. And people are learning to have a lot of patience and a lot of tolerance and understanding with each other. So indeed, this is actually part and parcel of a nature's process. When it is being compressed and being stressed, this is the time when they get a chance to rejuvenate itself and realign all the energies itself in order to make this world now a better place for us to stay. Now, to begin this morning's discussion, we basically want to talk about a very important person in our lives. And this is none other than Prince Siddhartha of Kapilavastu. Now, we all know that he was born to a royal family. And at the same time, he was brought up in luxuries, in a lot of training and arts. And at the same time, they expect him to be the next king of the kingdom when he grows up and eventually succeed the father, King Sudradana. So indeed, this person, we would never expect him to give up all the ills of life and to go forth in search of an answer to resolve this question of dukkha or suffering. And it is through this foresight itself that when he stole out of the palace on one of the outings into the city, he saw that there were old age. And he was very baffled by this sight itself. He was concerned that eventually he himself, including his wife, his parents, his close friends and relatives, would also one fine day be like this. And this debilitating condition is not satisfactory. And he was thinking to himself that how it would be good to actually end it once and for all. Then the next sight he saw was a very sick person, a person who feebly walking around without strength, suffering in pain, and very uncomfortable. And at the same time, this person has not been able to resolve as a result of being caught in this predicament. So again, he thought to himself that this kind of conditions will surely happen to him, to his family, and to the rest of the world. And that disturbs him very much. Then he saw a dead corpse, a corpse that was paraded in the streets and on the way to a burial. And this body, which was once lively and having a lot of emotions and activities, is now lifeless. And he has come to the cessation of an episode of his life, which is also very unsatisfactory. And he was also thinking to himself whether there could be a possibility that one day no one would have to face this ill or suffering again. Finally, of course, he saw a mendicant, an ascetic who was wandering, but being without possessions, yet this person is very contented and happy, peaceful in the minds, and has a lot of wisdom and philosophies. And he believed that this could be one of the avenues that he can adapt in order to try and find the answers to old age, sickness, and death. Now, this verily tells us a very important moral to say is that, although these three great events may not have happened yet in our lives, but it is inevitable. Eventually, one day, we will then have to face it. And when we have to face it, but we are clinging on to the good times, we are clinging on to the good health, we are clinging on to the life itself, we can be very disappointed and very unsatisfied. And that's when a lot of dukkha arises in our mind as a result. So it is important that we understand why the Buddha go forth, subsequently make a decision to then practice, cultivate, strive, eventually to find a formula so that he can end this once and for all. So on a very fateful night itself, when he stole out of the palace this time for the last time, he shaved off his head, discarded his adorned and good clothings, and subsequently adopted the life of a mendicant. And then for 6 long years, he then went from teacher to teacher, trying to find the answers that would eventually lead to the cessation of old age, sickness, and death. This was his wholehearted ambition in order to find the answer. And on the full moon of the Vesak month, he then attained what we call the enlightenment, the ultimate realization and the cessation of dukkha. And when he attained his enlightenment, he uttered these words: seeking but not finding the house builder, I traveled through rounds of countless births. Oh, painful is birth ever again, because the moment you are born, you will have to face old age, sickness, and death inevitably. House builder, you have now been seen. You shall not build the house again. Your rafters have been broken down. Your ridge pole is demolished too. My mind has now attained the unformed nibbana and reached the end of every kind of craving. By this attainment, the Buddha has now become, or Prince Siddhartha has now become the enlightened one, which we call the Buddha. And what did he find? And what did he discover? He found a formula which we commonly call the Four Noble Truths. And this is the formula that will eventually be applied into every aspect and every action, speech, and thoughts. And subsequently, we will then be able to attain the cessation of dukkha, which includes old age, sickness, and death. Now, what are the Four Noble Truths? The first Noble Truth basically tells us that the moment we are born, we have to face all these predicaments and suffering, or unsatisfactoriness of life. We will then have to grow old one day. We will then have to become sick eventually. And one fine day, we will just have to end this episode of life, which is called death. And these states or conditions, which we are not very happy about at the time when it happens, thus we then derive in our minds dukkha, or suffering. And we notice that even throughout the lives itself, without facing old age, sickness, and death, we face with a lot of defilements and ills and cravings, which leads to anger, hatred, jealousy, greed. And whenever these states occurs in our mind, we always feel very unsatisfied. And that's where dukkha is seen and experienced. The second noble truth talks about the cause. What was the cause of all this unsatisfactoriness? Why are we having dukkha? The answer in the noble truth points out that we are basically attached or basically crave for some phenomena which we do not want to change. We want our life to continue to be healthy. We want our life to continue to be youthful, and we want our life to continue to be alive and kicking, to be able to live to a ripe old age. And we also want to have all the possessions to be together with us, the people whom we love to be there at our beck and call without leaving us. We would also like to have the success, the praises that we get, the happiness that we are experiencing to last forever. So in other words, everlasting enjoyment of life. But the moment we are attached and crave for this, and when we realize that all these are just phenomena which will then appear and disappear, which will change from one form to another, we will change from one event leading to another. And then when they constantly change and constantly transform, then we are going to be very unhappy when the changes happens. So craving for something permanent, which will never happen, will give rise to the condition of unsatisfactoriness or dukkha. So in other words, there are actually three great cravings that we have embedded stubbornly inside our minds, which is called craving for existence, craving for non-existence, and craving for sensual pleasures. We crave for existence. We want to live forever. We want to have everlasting life. Even when we die, and if we happen to go to the other worlds, it will be everlasting life in the other worlds. But this is not the truth. It will never happen because all phenomena are impermanent. Then we also want to crave for non-existence if we suffer too much. If we experience a lot of ills and suffering which we cannot bear, we want to end it once and for all. And by doing so, we want to take our lives. We want to end it ourselves. And of course, the moment we go into this direction of self-destruction, we then develop what we call a craving for non-existence. And that itself is one of the cause or one of the cravings. And of course, finally, craving to please our sense doors, which we experience through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our taste, and our touch. We experience and enjoy the world through this sense door where we have pleasant and unpleasant experience, both pleasant and unpleasant experience at the same time. So because we are so attached to pleasing our senses, and the moment our sense changes or deteriorates or ceases, that craving itself is not satisfied. So we become unsatisfied. The third noble truth basically says that if we can identify that this was the cause due to craving, what if we were to end craving and cease craving once and for all? In other words, don't crave for something which is permanent. Any changes that arise in our lives, we accept it. We are prepared to face it. Our mind then do not go into unsatisfactoriness, but contentment, peacefulness, calmness, and of course, at the end of the day, happiness. So the end of suffering is a cessation of the cause that leads to suffering. So once you cease from the cause that leads to suffering, that is the end of suffering. Then suffering ceases. But all these are easier said than done. In other words, yes, we understand what is suffering. We know what causes suffering. And if we want to avoid suffering, then we cease from the cause of suffering. But we need to have a discipline. We need to have a methodology, have a philosophy to adapt and to learn and to experience and to slowly realize and finally, of course, attain what we call the cessation through this path itself. And this is called the Noble Eightfold Path. Again, very simply, we will say that the Noble Eightfold Path is a methodology or a training that we use in order to train ourselves that would eventually lead us to wisdom, panya. And with panya and wisdom, we will then have the right understanding and the right thoughts in facing all these predicaments and illness and suffering, and develop the methodology to cease all the craving once and for all. We start with sila, which then controls our speech, our action, and our livelihood. And by controlling this morality, we then develop a good base, a good foundation for the development of the mind, for the training and the cultivation of the mind. Thus, we move into the second stage, which is the dome, called concentration, developing what we call the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And finally, when our mind is at peace, our mind is focused, our mind is watchful and mindful of all the arising and falling of phenomena. And with that cultivation and concentration, rise in our minds the right understanding and right thought. And this is called panya. So therefore, the Eightfold Path is the methodology for us to train, develop, cultivate, condition ourselves to have the right thoughts and understanding what is called the phenomena of life. And once we understand how it works, once we understand how it happens, then we will be able then to resolve and end it once and for all. Now, I would like to move on to the fact that Buddhism, or the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha, for 45 long years after he gained his enlightenment at the age of 35, and finally when he passed away at the age of 80, within this period of 45 years, he was trying to inculcate us the understanding, the right understanding of the laws of nature or natural laws and how nature works, so that we can then learn the mechanisms of nature and live in harmony with it and in accordance with the laws of nature. And once we understand how nature works, we then do not go against the laws of nature. We will live in harmony with it. And when we are in harmony with nature, then nature will protect. Nature will take care of us. And this is exactly what the Buddha, throughout the 45 long years, inculcate in each and every one of us how the various phenomena, in other words, science, and how these laws governs everything within this nature or within this phenomena, or even put it this way, within the whole wide universe. Because the universe can be very limitless. It's everywhere. But in every corner, you'll find that the same laws of nature applies. And we are going to learn about these laws of nature. And finally, of course, live in harmony with it, in accordance with it. When you live in harmony with nature, then you'll be free from the consequences and the repercussions of nature. And you notice that in many other religions, they also say the same thing. Live in accordance to the law of God, and you'll be free from the punishment of God. Live in accordance to the law of Allah, and you'll be free from the wrath of Allah. So the message is all the same. Is that when we start to understand how this world or how this universe or how phenomena reacts, then we will then know how to keep ourselves in accordance. Now, Albert Einstein say this: science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. So in other words, while we pursue a philosophy of life, while we pursue a way of life or a culture of religious beliefs, we must always not forego science, because science is in tandem or is actually the laws of nature. So as Buddhists, we need to understand the various phenomena that are around us and understand the natural behavior of it. Because sometimes there may be certain events which is beyond our understanding, and we call it supernatural. But according to the Buddha, there is nothing supernatural. Everything is in accordance to the laws of nature. In other words, every phenomena is natural. Now remember, in the early days, when these theories were presented, the world is flat. Galileo Galilei was persecuted very badly as a result when he propounded this understanding. But today, he is regarded as a foremost scientist and a foremost thinker who is able then to see the works of nature. And the question of the origin of the universe is also a very natural event because it happens according to the laws of nature. And the origin of the universe basically talks about that this universe of ours doesn't have a beginning, neither is an end. Remember, whenever we talk about beginning and an end, we always say that something must happen before that, because we are dealing with time and space when we use this word in the beginning. In the beginning, or at a particular point in time, in space, at a particular point in space, something happens. But when we deal with time and when we deal in space, science has always tells us that it is infinite. Infinity. So when it's infinity and you talk about a particular point, then there must be something before that particular point. When you talk about something on a particular point in space, then there must be other points outside that point. Of course, our human mind is limited, but this is the nature of the universe. And we all know that this universe is made up of a big mass of energy. And this big mass of energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It's already an accepted fact, the conservation of energy. It is pulsating, it expands and it contracts. but it's within the same mass. And during its expansion, that is the formation of the universe. And it will come to a limit of expansion when it then starts to contract again. And during its contraction, the energy becomes denser and denser. And then one day, it becomes so dense that all the energy within it becomes hibernated. That is the end of one universe. That's why in the Buddha's teaching, we always talk about karpa, eons. Eons is actually one happening, one expansion and contraction. But there are many contractions, there are many expansions. But as long as it is expanding and contracting within that same mass, the energy within itself can transform from one form to another. It can transform from heat to light, sound to heat. The different forms of energy, which is part of nature, changes from one form to another, but it is all within that same mass. So this is again another great understanding. And if we read through the teachings of the Buddha, there are many explanations of the combination of this energy within the universe, especially when he starts to talk about the universal laws. And this is part and parcel of Mother Nature. Now remember, the law of gravity. Remember the apple? When Isaac Newton sat under the apple tree, and the apple then falls from the top down to the ground, then he realized that there is such a law called the law of gravity. But does it mean that there was no law of gravity before he discovered it? Natural laws or universal laws are always there. In fact, we always say that the Dhamma is always there because it is part and parcel of nature. But it takes someone to have the capabilities to discover it and subsequently then expound it and develop on it. Same thing like the law of Dharma is already there. But the Buddha, through Prince Siddhartha's effort, discovers the Dharma and then expounds it to the world. But like all nature of things, one day it will lose its efficacy. It will become distorted. It will then become adulterated. It will become confused. And subsequently, then you do not get the real law of nature or the Dharma itself. Then you need another being with the ability and the potentiality to then rediscover the same law and then expound it again. And that begins another Buddha era. So in other words, when we have the coming of the Buddhas, we understand that the Dhamma, which was founded by the previous Buddha, has deteriorated, has become so concocted that you can no longer discover the truth. And then you will then need another being cultivated well enough in order to rediscover the truth and then expound again to the world. So Mother Nature talks about the universal laws, right? And of course, we are now going to go into the various natural laws as preached by the Buddha itself. Now, whenever we talk about energies, we always talk about the mind and we talk about matter. Of course, there is this analogy which is a question of what is mind is no matter, and what is matter, never mind. Because sometimes this kind of theories and some of these philosophies may be a bit difficult to digest with the current cultivated minds. But what did the Buddha talks about the mind and matter? Mind is nama, matter is rupa. So we are basically a combination of mind and matter, especially beings. That's why we are called psychophysical, comprising of psycho, the mind, physical, the matter. But what are the mind and matter? If you analyze further, they are just basically bundles of energy. And that's why the Buddha points out in the 5 aggregates, pancha khandha. And before I go into the niyamas, let me explain on the pancha khandhas. Now, 4 of these khandhas represents what we call the mind. And what are they comprised of? They comprise of consciousness. They comprise of perceptions. They comprise of feelings. And they comprise of creativity or potential thinking or volitional thinking. Now we are conscious, we are alive, we know that we are breathing. We have what we call recognition. We recognize that, oh, I'm Charlie Chia and you are brother E. So then you develop what we call recognition that we are what we are. And then next comes emotions. Feelings. You feel good, you feel happy, you feel sad, you feel angry. And of course, lastly, is the volitional thinking or the creative thinking that arises inside the mind. So the 4 khandhas basically represents the consciousness, the perception, the feeling, and the volitional. And the Buddha has always said that, you know, when you have the first 3, when you have consciousness, you are aware, you are alive, you feel good, and you recognize, but that does not contribute karmas. It's just the last aggregate, the 4th aggregate, which is volitional thinking, intention, niat. You must have an intention. Intention to do good, intention to do bad. And that intention itself leads to the creation of a karmic energies within this stream of consciousness. And it follows you as the consciousness moves from one form to another. Now the 5th aggregate talks about physical or the body or the form. And the form comprises, according to the Buddha, 4 elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. And basically, earth, water, wind, and fire talks about particles brought together by water and binding against each other to create what we call a form. And as they react with each other in close binding, they then have attraction and repulsion like any electromagnetic bodies, and thus creating what we call wind. And finally, of course, creating heat as they knock against each other. So thus, when we look at ourselves, we are basically particles or earth elements joined together by by water. And because of that binding factor, we then generate action and movements, flow, heart beating. And finally, of course, which give rise to fire or heat. Now, when the heart fails, deteriorates, it grows old, it becomes sick, and one day distinguished, then that is the end of wind. When there's no more wind, there's no more fire. When there's no more wind and fire, then the water then starts to dehydrate. And when the binding factor disappears, earth then becomes dust again. That's why we always have this word says, from dust you come, to dust you become. So when you have these four elements, it's basically the representations of energies. Because if you were to break them down, Earth is basically molecules. Molecules is atoms. Atoms is protons, neutrons, and electrons. And what are they? They are just balls and bundles of energy. Heat is energy. Wind is energy. So therefore, when we first talk about the natural laws, we talk about that every of our phenomena is made up of energies which transform from one form to another within a mass. Therefore, when we talk and you're able to listen, it's also an energy that is actually been transformed through what we call a lot of these intermediate energies. There must be electrical, there must be electronics, there must be a medium between each other. Then when it starts to knock against, then that transmission then carries forward. And thus, sound is being sent, and that's why you can hear me. Now let's move on to what the Buddhist teachings on the 5 niyamas. Now altogether, there are 5 natural laws. Niyamas means natural laws or natural orders. Now these operate both in the physical and mental realm, the nama and the rupa. Now let's go into the first one, which is called Uttu Niyama. Now Uttu Niyama talks about physical inorganic order. It talks about cycles. In other words, it is a law of nature that everything happens in the cycle. Let's look at the weather. Let's look at the seasons. You have winter, which will then be followed by spring, then summer, then autumn, and what else? It continues with winter again. So it goes year round and round and round. You get what we call the day become the night, night become a day. Reason is because the planet revolves around the sun. And it keeps on going round and round and round. And each time you then get what we call a turn of the earth, which then faces the sun. And those that faces the sun will have day, and those not facing the sun will then have night. But the turning is continuous. That's why everything happens in a continuous flux. The cycle of the moon. For every 14 to 15 days, you get a change of a moon. From full moon to new moon to full moon. And it happens very accurately on a cycle. And even as human beings, we also have our cycles. I think the ladies would understand this very well. And this is part of the physical inorganic order. And because of that, when winter comes, don't worry, because eventually it will lead to spring. And then spring will then have summer, summer will then have autumn. And it will repeat itself again and again and again. So do not despair, because there's no permanency of the situation that we are in. And this is part of the natural laws. Because every phenomena happen in a cycle. The next one, of course, is organic order, or physical organic order, Bija Niyama, which talks about the germinal order of things. That when you plant a mango seed, you get a mango tree. When you plant a durian seed, you get a durian tree. You cannot plant a mango seed to get a durian tree. So therefore, these are what we call natural laws which we have to observe. But sometimes we tamper with it. We tamper with Uttu Niyama, we tamper with Bija Niyama. We don't like winter, so we tilt the earth by using some nuclear explosions to shake and thus creating the rotation to be in another direction. And thus we don't, every time we come near to winter, we avoid it. Same thing with germinal order when we try with genetic modifications. We can actually plant a mango, but smell like durian. That's why we have coconut mangoes. We have so many combination of genetic modifications. But at the end of the day, when we temper with these laws of nature, we must face the consequences. Same thing when we disturb the cycles of the seasons and the climate. We must face the consequences of that. The third one is called karma niyama, which talks about the law of action and reaction. And this is actually a very important law, which we Buddhists are very careful about. Is that when you have an action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. And that's how make rockets travel in space. And that makes vehicles able to propel because of this law. And it also applies on the moral order. When you sow good seeds, you reap good fruits. You sow bad seeds, you reap bad fruits. Because you develop what we call an action and a reaction. Basically, it's a translation of or transformation of kinetic energy to potential energy. Now, I think many of you would have heard about this spring door. When you have a spring door, when nothing happens, it remains stationary. The spring door is the one that is fixed with spring hinges, and then it opens and closes on its own. So when you have a spring door and you stand beside the spring door, and you do nothing about it, does the door say, no, I don't like your face, I want to slam on you? It doesn't. But when you have an intention, remember, you have consciousness, you have recognition, you have feelings, that does not contribute to an action. But when you have an intention or volitional thinking and says, why not I push the door? That translates into an action, and the action then push the door, and the door starts pushing. And the door moves. And as you apply an action, which is kinetic energy, the door now converts this kinetic energy into a potential to swing back. So in other words, you are now transforming kinetic energy to potential energy. And if you let it go, that potential is there, waiting to swing. And when it swings and you are in the path, you again get hit. But of course, many of us are very smart. When we push the door, we take a hook, we hooked it. There you see, I created an action, but there's no reaction. But does it mean that there is no potential? The potential has been eradicated? No. The potential is always there. It's like our karmic seeds. Once we have developed the potential, it lies within our mental stream all the time, following us life after life, until we expand it, until we exhaust it. Same thing like this door. Until that hook, let it go. It will then releases its potential and hit on the person who contributed to it. So therefore, understanding this law, that if you don't want that potential to arise, then don't create that action. So if you don't want bad results, don't do bad deeds. So this is again another natural law. Now we have another law, which I jump to Chitta Niyama. This is called the law of the minds. And that's how our mind works. It's a natural law, which talks that our mind can only do one thing at one time. So if we are happy, we are not unhappy. And if we are unhappy, we are not happy. We cannot be happy and unhappy at the same time. That one is called xiao liao. So therefore, when you want happiness, then don't be unhappy. Remove all your unhappy thoughts. Suppress all your unhappy thoughts. Think of all the happy thoughts. Because our mind can only do one thing at one time. And that particularly gives us hope in life. Reason is because if we are dwelling in unhappy thoughts and suffering from it, what is the next best thing to do? Is to think of a happy thought. Think of all the good deeds that you have done. Think of all the happy occasion that you are involved in. And when the mind switches onto that happy thoughts, it leaves behind the unhappy thoughts and thus cultivate a healthy mind and a happy mind. And so we don't have to dwell in our miseries. We don't have to dwell in our unhappiness. We can move on. So therefore, understanding these characteristics of the mind, then we are then able to control, we are then able to pacify, understanding its working. And thus, we will then be able to cease from the craving. Lastly, of course, Dhamma-niyama, which is the order of the norm. And this deals with a lot of what we commonly call miracles. Like I said earlier, that the Buddha never encouraged supernatural understanding, because he says there's nothing supernatural. Every phenomena that happens is a natural event, because it happens in accordance to the nature, to the laws of nature. When we are out in our gardens one fine morning, and there was this orchid plant which never blooms, and suddenly one morning when you go out, you notice that there is a beautiful blossom out of this orchid plant. Now, normally we call this good omen. Good luck comes coming. But basically it signifies that when the conditions are right, these events will happen. In other words, the vibrations, the energy in the air is conducive for the germination and the arising of this potential. In other words, the blossoming of the flower. Now, we all know that we have done a lot of good deeds in our past, and also we have done a lot of bad deeds in our past through countless lives. And these are seeds that we have sown that has yet to ripen. But they only ripen when the conditions is right. And our good seeds will only ripen when our minds is positive, is happy, is calm and peaceful. Our bad seeds takes its form when we are desperate, when we are angry, when we are unhappy, and when we are negative. So there are these two conditions that can arise inside our minds. So when that happens, then if we want the good seeds to arise, always keep a peaceful and happy mind. That's why we always say, when we learn to become good Buddhist, we always maintain a peaceful mind, we always maintain a calm mind, and always have happy thoughts inside our minds. Because these are conditions that then provides the opportunity for our good seeds, our good potential to arise and to take its beneficial effects upon us. But when such things happen as a result of positivity of the mind, and when good things happens, we say, that is a miracle. We get cured. We get all the good fortune. We get all the good tidings that happens. And we say, that must be my prayers. That must be my good fortune. That must be something called a miracle. But basically, understanding the 5 niyamas, this is because we are able to maintain a good mind, a calm and peaceful mind, avoid all the negativities. All then our good events will follow. It's like the simple analogy of the law of attraction. A positive mind always attracts a positive events. So when we talk about the 5 niyamas, we talk about the inorganic order, which is Uttuniyama, which deals with rain, seasons, what they call nature of energies. We also have what we call the Bijaniyama, which is the order of organic, from the various germs and seeds, right? And cells, even genes. That's why we Buddhists are very much against the genetic engineering and also what we call the cloning of beings, because these are tampering with the laws of nature. And if we tamper, be careful, we are going to face with the repercussions and the consequences of it. Then we have also the Karma Niyama, where we sow good seeds, we will then reap the good fruits. And of course, we have the Dhamma-inspired, which is the phenomena of various things that can happen as a result of the positivities of the conditions. And lastly, of course, Chitta Niyama, which talks about the various processes, understanding the workings of the mind. And if we can understand and know how it works, and we live in accordance with it, we will then be free from the consequences of it. And all this is basically confined to our understanding that we are born again and again and again as a result of not being able to escape from the house builder. And thus, by adopting the Buddha's formula of the Four Noble Truths and conditioning and training of the minds, we will then be able to stop the rounds of rebirth and finally attain what we call the cessation of birth and death. We all know that this understanding of the characteristics of phenomena, and when we understand it, that's why we can live in accordance with it. Remember, we are talking about all energies, all phenomena. They are all impermanent. And there's no permanent entity for you to grasp and say, stop, don't move, don't change. Remain like this all the time, everlastingly. But it doesn't happen. And if we are attached to something which we don't want to change, we are going to be unsatisfied. So when we understand these three characteristics of all phenomena, anicca, anatta, dukkha, that gives rise to a realization. And when we realize that we need not have to attach to anything, we need not have to crave. We crave for nothing now. Because there's nothing permanent. There's nothing for us to attach. And hence, we want to attain the cessation of unsatisfactoriness. Lastly, I would like to talk about these three luck, we call it. 天才, 地才, 人才. Now, this has something to do with our understanding of phenomena and also the understanding of the laws of nature. Now, a lot of us thought that when we are born with a treasure trove that we brought along. Maybe from the heavens, there's some belief. But as Buddhists, we always say that it is our karmas that we brought over from our previous lives. It may give us opportunities to become well taken care of, the fortune to live a comfortable life and happy life. Or it could come in with a lot of burden for us to suffer, for us to face, for us to deal. And this is called the heaven's luck, or 天才. Grossly. But when you brought along this kind of luck, you need to have the right conditions. You need to meet with the right conditions. You need to prepare yourself with the right conditions. Because, like we mentioned just now, that the seed, whether it's good seed or bad seed, if it's planted in the wrong conditions, it does not germinate accordingly. Imagine you plant a mango seed in a desert, and there's no water, there's too much heat, and there's no nutrients, there's no shade. The conditions are never conducive, and that seed will never find it conducive to germinate. But when the weather change, and now there's rain, and the nutrients is on the ground, and everything becomes now very comfortable and conducive, the conditions is right, then that mango seed will then germinate and blossom into a huge mango tree. And that conditions itself is called Ti Chai, the earth elements. So therefore, you have heaven luck and you have earth luck. You can give rise to a good result. But there is another part of that cosmic trinity which is called Ren Chai, or man's luck. You may have a lot of good luck, you may have the right conditions, but you never go and do something about it. There's this story about this man who went to see a fortune teller, and the fortune teller says, you are going to have very good luck when you are 40 years old. The sky is going to open and gold is going to fall down from the sky one by one, and you will land all for you. So on his 40th birthday, he went out to the door and he looked up to the sky, and really true, the sky really opened and gold started falling down from the sky, gold bars, and it all landed in front of his house. The timing was right. But when it landed in front of this house, he thought to himself and says, well, if all this gold is meant for me, it will then slowly come into the house. It will then be mine. But as the gold fell in front of the house, it's public property. As passerbys comes by, they saw the gold, they pick it up and off they go. They pick it up and off they go. And this man is still sitting by the door and says, come lah, come. It would never happen. So Ren Chai means, what are you doing? Your human efforts. You must push yourself towards that direction. You must lift up your butts and move forward to go and collect the gold into the house. So when you understand this cosmic trinity, you will know that although you may have one or two of them, but it doesn't work. You must have all three. And so that is the reason why when we talk about heaven luck, we talk about our people who talk about fate, destiny, karmic energies, and you are born with it, and then life journey begins from here. Because you are born as a human being, that's why you have the opportunities. And your long lifespans allows you to enjoy. So these are all part of your heaven luck, the timing of it. Right? Of course, your earth luck is that you are born, but it must be in the right environment. It's like a dog who is born in a family which is very rich, and they live in aircon room. They have breakfast where they are served with steak and eggs every day, compared with another human being who are born as a human being. Opportunity is there, but unfortunately born in a very poor family, crawling on the streets and eating from the scraps. So environment, upbringing, timing, opportunity is also very important. And of course, lastly, when you have all this heaven luck and when you have all the earth luck, but you must make the right effort, proactive enough to create that achievement, to build up yourself, to build up your character, to build up the attitude, educate yourself, and managing all this and creating the healthy lifestyles. Then only you can move forward to achieve what you wish to do, because you understand that all these are part and parcel of nature. So in order to boost your physical and mental energy, which is the mind and matter, you need to have a lot of training and exercises. Understanding that we are just a mass of energy. And this mass of energy, if stressed up, you can actually get a lot of illness, you can get a lot of difficulties, you can get a lot of stress. Now, when we start to relax, when we start to focus our mind, we start to have the bliss of concentration, our body energies then align itself and go from what you call blocked to smooth. You find that you begin to enjoy the rich benefits by understanding that basically we are just a combination of mental energy and physical energies. Now, I hope you would be able to know that there are some who are sick, and when you are sick and you are negative, you are very, what you call, desperate, filled with anxieties, you find that your sickness doesn't go away. But when you begin to pacify your mind and says, okay, when my body is sick, don't allow my mind to be sick. You find that with that mental energies itself, it then realigns the physical energy within you. And one day, you'll find that the sickness just go away and you remain healthy for most part of your life. So therefore, we must always maintain, by understanding this, mindfulness to keep a good mental health because of the understanding of mind over matter. A healthy mind always leads to a healthy body. Of course, a healthy body supports a healthy mind. So mindfulness meditation is essential for us to keep ourselves in line with the energies around us. Because remember, we are all within a universe. And this universe is one single mass of energy. What affects us affects others. What affects others affects us. Because we are all interconnected. Then, when you understand the laws of nature and live in accordance with it, then surely you'll be able to find a lot of joy, a lot of bliss, a lot of delight and happiness. So with that, I would like to say that the gift of Dharma excels all gifts. The taste of Dharma excels all taste. The delight in Dharma excels all delights. The craving freed vanquishes all suffering. So may you all be well and happy. May you be free from all the predicaments and always keep a positive, calm, and a peaceful mind to overcome all changes and uncertainties that has arisen. May you all be well and happy. Sukhihotu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charlie. We shall now open to the floor for questions, and we have quite a number already. Okay, I'll read out the first one.
Yes, you read out because I can't get through to my box.
Yeah. Okay, I'll read out. The first question, is COVID-19 due to our collective bad karma?
Well, what you call there's always this understanding that when you have little dewdrops collected over a surface, these dewdrops does not harm. But when the dewdrops starts to meet each other and start together, then it becomes collective. It becomes accumulated. And the impact then becomes very strong. Now, if all of us were to keep our mental and physical energy in an orderly form, in a hygienic form, then I think we will be free from a lot of this kind of maladies. So we all know that when COVID first started, where did it start? It starts from a market which is very unhygienic. It starts from a market which doesn't care about the health of the environment. And because we tamper with that, we neglected that. We do not understand how nature works. And that's the reason why we have to face this pandemic which spreads so fast. So now the only way is now to develop discipline and develop orderly business and then starts to slowly recover back our lost territory. So this is one of the lesson that we learn. Although this uncertainty is still not yet resolved, but like all our understanding about cycles or seasons, it will then one day be resolved, and hopefully we learn from our lessons, because humans being humans, we always have this potentiality of forgetting after some time, and then we get back to our old habits again. So hopefully this lesson we learn will last for a slightly longer time. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question. What is the Buddhist view regarding LGBT? What are the causes that humans have created to be LGBT?
All right, I just like to relate a very interesting story. There was once, I think, probably about 15 years ago, there was a newspaper that time, and they wanted to find out about the Buddhist view, because I think there was a campaign against LGBT, and there was a very hot issue at that time, and all the religions were actually sort of like finding ways to disengage and finding ways to put it down. But when the question was posed to me to give a Buddhist view, I mentioned this. I said, well, what you like to eat is not what I like to eat. What you prefer is not what I prefer. And I think each mind is different. So therefore, we have to accept the diversity of minds. And on the other thing is that if we look at a person with these inclinations, or with this, what we call likes and dislikes, does it make them less a human being? Can they also achieve enlightenment? So that determines whether we should be prejudiced against such behavior. So the story was reported in the papers, and I received a lot of phone call thanking me and says, wow, you are the ones, groups which understands our feelings and our, predicaments, and all kinds of compliments. But one very important compliment was, are you one of us? So what we Buddhists always talks about is that we are dealing with a mind and a body. And a mind is the one that can achieve the greatest heights. A body depends on individuals. It is their own body. And if they wish to develop their body in various forms, well, there's nothing much which we should be prejudiced against, because each man's meat is another man's poison. And when we understand this diversity of thinking, then we are always never on the wrong side of the morals. But of course, some religion, because they are very dogmatic, they practically sort of like exterminate this kind of thoughts and says, no, the law doesn't allow, the morals doesn't allow, therefore they should not be allowed to practice this kind of lifestyle. As Buddhists, we are always more concerned about developing the right thoughts and the right understanding. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Facebook. How can chanting a mantra continuously in our daily life helps us to live a happy life and have a peaceful death?
Okay. Now, I remember there was this Buddhist group in Ipoh. And their mission is actually, whenever they hear someone is on the verge of death and about to pass on, they will go to the house and they will then sit together with the person, the passing away person, and they will then ask the passing away person to just recite a mantra, and they will encourage them to recite the mantra. Now remember just now when I was mentioning about Chitta Niyama, that your mind can only do one thing at one time, which means to say, if your mind is on the mantra, Do you think of all the unhappy thoughts? Do you think of all the desperate thoughts? Do you think of all the fearful thoughts? Your mind is only on that mantra, either Namo Omi Tofo or Namo Buddhaya, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhasa, or Om Mane Padme Hum. When your mind is on that particular object, you don't think of anything else. And when your mind is concentrated, a byproduct of it is actually blissfulness. And if a person can pass away with a good mind, a happy mind, a peaceful mind, and that frequency itself that is emitted will always find the right radio. This is what I would like to encourage, that whenever our next of kin is about to pass away, always hold their hands and bring them to happy thoughts. Encourage them to think about the good deeds that they have done. And encourage them to think about the good actions and the good events that they were involved in. And when their mind dwells on it and they breathe their last, is that a happy mind? If it is a happy mind, then that happy mind will find a happy realm of rebirth. So mantras is actually very important. Mantra is a form of meditation. You're focused, your mindfulness. And as you dwell on these words repeatedly, your mind then moves into a peaceful and calm state. So it is another methodology of focusing and training of the mind. All right. So it helps many people who can't sit down and watch their breath. It helps many people who can't sit and watch the pain in their legs and in their, in their heads. They cannot practice mindfulness. They cannot practice concentration in that form. Then they can practice by observing mantras. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Datuk. Quite a number of questions to go. We may have to stretch our session a little bit longer. Okay, next question. Is it true that after we use up all our good karma, it is time for our death?
Remember, how many lives have you lived? Countless. Eons. Kalpas. You have been in existence for a long, long time. And you would have accumulated a lot of good seeds, and you have accumulated a lot of bad seeds. Now remember, we were saying just now about Dhamma-niyama, when the conditions are not there, that seed will hibernate. They will wait for its turn. Like a mango seed in the desert, it will wait. When the weather changes only, then you will germinate. So all our seeds that is within us is waiting for the right condition and right time. Even until we pass away in this very life itself, there will still be remaining potential which has yet to be exhausted. Remember, no one can actually spend for you. No one can actually take away from you. You are the one who is responsible, and you will have to exhaust or expand it. So you carry forward. And every time when you carry forward, there's always this remaining. But ask yourself whether you want your good seeds to happen or whether you want your bad seeds to happen. Now, there are bad seeds where you say, okay, I'm not going to allow it to have the right condition, because if the conditions are not right for it, it will remain in the desert all the time, hibernate. And there will be, even until the day we gain our enlightenment, there will still be a lot of bad seeds, bad potential, bad karmas, which is yet to germinate and take effect. No entity anymore, the moment you attain the mahana or nirvana. So therefore, you never exhaust or finish exhausting your, karmic seeds. But we manage your karmas. So it's the art of managing, how you create conditions to manage and allow seeds which you want and seeds which you don't want. It's all in your effort. It is your ren chai that you can do it, right? Understanding that it happens, there is this potential, and you learn how to manage that potential. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Since Buddhists do not believe in self, Is it our mind, consciousness, or karmic energy that is reborn? How do we guide our mind at the moment of death so as to attain a good, happy rebirth in the higher realm?
Remember, you are comprised of two forms of energy. Psychophysical, nama rupa. You are comprised of mental energy. You are comprised of physical energy. Now, your mental energy is the one that passes on. Your physical energy you leave behind. In other words, when a person dies, the body then remains, but the mind is then transmitted and goes into another form and combined with another form. And when you combine with another form, that will be a new combination altogether. So that mental energy continues and it can never be exterminated. Remember, mental energy comprises or brought together as a result of craving. As long as craving is still there, it's almost like you have voltage or amperes in your electric current. If an electric current continues to have voltage, continues to have amperes, and it will always continue to exist as electric current. But what if we remove the voltage? What if we remove the amperes? And when it's transmitted without amperes and voltage, does it manifest as electric current? Same thing. When our mental energies ceases from craving, there is no more voltage. And when it parts away from this physical form, that mental energy doesn't manifest itself as a mental energy anymore. So there is no more mind. And when there's no more mind, does it attach itself to another form? If it doesn't combine again or re-become, then it is called Ni-Varna. Ni means no. Varna means become. No more become. That is the cessation of birth and death. So this understanding is very important because we understand that we are just two forms of energy, but that two forms of energy keep on manifesting. And we want to stop the manifestation of it. And the only way to stop the manifestation of it is to find the cause for their manifestation. And the cause for their manifestation is tangha, craving. And that we relate it to voltage or amperes for electric current. So when you remove that, totally eradicate craving, it's like the electric current without any more voltage or amperes. Then it doesn't manifest. Then you say, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. What happens to that mental energy? Well, if it doesn't manifest as what you call mental energy, it is then transformed into other forms of natural energy. It can be light, it can be sound, it can be heat, it can be wind. But as long as it doesn't manifest as another mental energy, it doesn't recombine with another physical form. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Datuk. One final question for this morning. Is the word everlasting love properly used since we Buddhists understand impermanence? What is your thought, Datuk?
Well, if you understand anicca, anatta, dukkha, this word doesn't exist in our vocabulary anymore, isn't it? Because nothing is everlasting, because it keeps on changing from one form to another. Today may be love. Remember, 7 years later, it could be hate. Well, today you say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But 7 years later, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. It can change from one form to another. So therefore, there is no permanency, even on feelings, even on events, even on phenomena existence. All are anicca, impermanence. So if we can accept that change and say, since everything is changing, then let me not be bothered and disturbed by this. Whenever a change occurs, let me accept it. Whenever a change occurs, let me manage it. And when the mind thinks in this attitude, the mind becomes very positive and strong. In other words, we are not disturbed anymore. We are not unduly disturbed as a result of changes that happens in our lives. And that is the success after understanding the law of karma, or we call it the laws of nature. All right. So with that, thank you very much for this wonderful session. And I believe hopefully we will meet again in the future. And with that, thank you to Bandar Utama Buddhist Society for inviting me. And I'm very happy to participate. And about 60 to 70% of my Buddhist training is actually from Babs, because I actually had a lot of experience and good times together with Babs. Thank you very much. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.